That's incredible that you got out of that. What was the straw that broke the camel's back and made you leave?
Well, it was long. I think I was in a deep depression, so nobody could reach me, and I could barely talk. I was bedridden. And that's not like me. I mean, I don't have a problem communicating normally. And nothing was changing. It was like 3 years of no change. And then I feel that I found, you could say, I wasn't there yet, because the other thing about it, Scientology, is it's atheistic. There is no real God. And I believe that whatever you believe is cool, and whatever you feel is a higher power or not a higher power, that's cool. They just debunked that idea without getting into details. And I think that I was being moved by a higher power. And I just happened to see on Google News something about somebody I knew who had left Scientology, and I started reading it. Now, by the way, you're forbidden to read certain things on the internet. You're forbidden to do that, so I knew I was violating the rules. But I read it anyway, and I liked the journalist who did the article. So I went back. It was at the Village Voice, which was a New York newspaper. I went back and read another one. And secretly, by the way, I didn't say anything to anybody. And I started reading, and all of a sudden I was reading things that I knew, but from a different perspective. Somebody who was telling the truth, because it felt like the truth to me. So I was reading that for 2 months, and then one day I woke up and the depression was gone. I mean, there was, you know how there's a transition and you have a good day and then, it's not good. No, this was like the night before I was depressed and suicidal. I woke up the next day, the sun was shining, it was a beautiful day, and for the first time in decades, I felt grateful. And to me, gratefulness is an important part of our lives. That is for me. I'm very grateful for the things that I have and for the things that my friends in the past, etc. And so I don't know if that was it. This wasn't really a turning point. There was a turning point when I started to not care what they thought enough that I could read something on the internet that I wasn't supposed to read. And then that changed my perspective, and then I didn't really understand. I realized when I woke up and I felt grateful, I'm no longer in that group. I'm not in that group anymore. And that was the start of my journey of rehabilitation.
And that was your second chance, right?
Boy, was it, because I was this close. Let me see if I can get it in screen. Come on. Where is it? Oh, this close to checking out. I was very close, and because I had no medication and I had no real therapy, I had no real help. And so I knew that I could do something like that. And what kept me from doing that was my kids. I knew I couldn't do that to my kids. That was just too horrible to leave your kids that way. So it's ironic that they are part of what saved me. I had enough love for them to not submit them to their father dying by his own hand. And then years later, 5 or 6 years later, they both were told that they had to separate from me. So yeah, I think it's an interesting story, and hopefully people will resonate with it in the movie.
Definitely. Do you have a distributor taking the movie, or not yet?
Not yet. We just finished the edit. We're doing a little bit of tweaking. Well, it's already submitted to several festivals, which is a place, that they sometimes the distributors find a movie that's like an independent movie in a festival. So we're hoping that occurs. I don't have any. I'm looking for direct connections to. I think it would do well on Netflix. I think it would do well on Amazon or Hulu or one of those platforms. And we did a short film before that about my brother that was just about something that he created, and I've gotten really good response on that. It's a whole different kind of story. Because he invented a thing called spinning, and didn't really get the credit. Somebody else took credit for it, so I wanted to tell his story of how he developed it. And so I learned a little about filmmaking, and then I had to let the director go of Brothers Broken, the long documentary, so I had to take it over. So I'm just learning, and I encourage people to make films. It's so much simpler. You guys are doing YouTube stuff and editing, and it's what it's about. So.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Have any final questions, Brendan?
What instrument do you find? You find the piano, but what sort of piano is your favorite? Is it a grand piano or a certain type of piano?
Well, I think it varies. That I don't have time. I'm not set up to show you, but in a way, I love piano because it's such a fundamental instrument when you're scoring. If you listen to film scores, so many of the scores, you find somewhere in there's a piano in the movie. Now, interestingly enough, in Second Chances, I don't think there's hardly any piano. It's mostly guitar, because of the songs, and we're more rural country kind of things. But I think you could say keyboard, there's so many sounds in the computer now that you can access, and some of them sound almost real. Like a violin, you're playing it on the keyboard, but you have these different knobs you can do to make it sound more real and stuff like that. So I would say I'm glad that I studied piano so that I could it's easier for me to when I have to compose on the keyboard or with the sounds in the computer, it's easier. Of course, I love, if I was going to say what instruments is the most exciting for me, I'd say the orchestra.
Yes. Oh, the whole thing.
The whole orchestra. And I think that's the way a lot of composers thought. They played piano. Piano was the instrument, right? Like Mozart, Beethoven, Franz Liszt, all these different great composers.
And George Frederick Handel and Johann.
Yeah. Bach was more organ. And oh my God, he was so advanced for his time. But it was a keyboard, so you could say, it's like the keyboard itself. And the organs of Bach's day, did you ever see how big they were?
Yeah.
They're massive. Like, they take up a whole church wall, and that's not 10, 15 feet high. We're talking 40, 50 feet high, and they had all these different sounds in them. So the only person who could really afford, the only group that could afford to pay for these organs were the churches, because they had money and they had the space. And so you had these church organists that were the orchestra in a way, because you could get different sounds out of the organ. And so when you heard the organ, it was inspiring. It was so big, and some of the low sounds were so low that it would literally shake the church. So the answer, I think, is the keyboard in general.
Ah, okay.
That's awesome, yeah.
That's awesome, man. So that's all we have for now because time's run out. But we thank you for coming on.
But I appreciate you having me on, and I should have talked more about second chances, but we did get a little bit in there.
Yeah, and we can always do a follow-up interview if you want to talk more about second chances.
Sure. No, there's the whole thing of the songs and the characters and stuff like that. So, but I appreciate you having me and listening, and I think that's my story of how I came back. I think is part of your series.
Yes.
Definitely, because it's all about inspiring others. And yeah, we'll bring you back on maybe in a few weeks' time, maybe a month, to do more second chances stuff.
Okay, well, that's fine. And all I can say is we always have a second chance.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, Brendan, take us out.
We'd like to thank you, Geoff, for coming on and sharing your stories and everything like that. And we hope to see you back on very soon. And I'd like to thank Doug as well for being an awesome co-host with me. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And we'll see you next time on Relentless and Unstoppable. Thank you.